Justin and Hailey Bieber were getting ready for a quiet night out. They had been invited to a small dinner party by a close friend in Hollywood. The event wasn't a huge red carpet thing. It was more like a private gathering with familiar faces, good music, and warm lights. Hailey wore a simple dress, comfortable but stylish, and Justin kept things casual with a clean jacket and sneakers. They were both hoping for a peaceful evening. It had been a busy week filled with meetings, events, and travel. They were finally getting a chance to slow down and enjoy time with people they trusted. The car ride was calm, with soft music playing and city lights blinking outside the window. They didn't talk much, but it wasn't awkward. Sometimes silence feels like comfort. When they arrived at the house, the setting felt cozy and welcoming. The front yard was decorated with string lights, and there was a gentle breeze in the air. People were already laughing, chatting, and holding plates of snacks. The smell of grilled food drifted through the air, mixing with the scent of flowers nearby. Hailey smiled and waved at a few friends as they stepped inside. Justin stayed close to her, nodding to familiar faces. Someone handed them drinks, and they slowly moved through the space, greeting others and joining in conversations. Everything felt easy, like the kind of evening that reminded them why they liked these small gatherings more than big, flashy events. Inside, music played low in the background. Some people sat on couches, others stood in groups talking about travel, new projects, and weekend plans. Candles flickered on tables, and laughter echoed from the kitchen. The mood was light, friendly, and peaceful. Justin and Hailey found a spot near the back patio, where they could sit down and watch the night go by. Hailey leaned back in her chair, looking up at the stars. Justin scrolled through his phone for a moment, then put it away and looked around. They talked about something funny a friend had said earlier, and for a moment, it felt like everything was exactly how it should be. But that feeling wouldn't last. Somewhere near the front of the house, the door opened again. They didn't notice right away, just more guests arriving, or so it seemed. The music kept playing, the laughter continued, and the lights flickered gently in the breeze. Yet within a few minutes, Justin's mood began to shift. Hailey noticed it first in his eyes, then in the way he sat forward slightly, distracted. She glanced toward the entrance, curious, but didn't see anything unusual. Still, she felt it, that sudden change in energy, like something had just shifted under the surface. The night was supposed to be easy, calm, safe. But something, or someone, had just changed everything. The evening was still moving along quietly when the room suddenly shifted. People near the door paused, their conversations growing softer. A few heads turned. Some whispers passed quickly between small groups. Something, or someone, had just arrived. Hailey looked around, trying to figure out what had changed. Justin was already standing. Selena Gomez had just walked in. She wasn't expected. No one had mentioned her name earlier in the night. She stepped inside calmly, dressed in simple black with her hair tied back. She didn't smile too much or try to get attention. But the moment she entered, it was like the air in the room got heavier. Not in a loud or uncomfortable way. Just a quiet shift that everyone felt without speaking it out loud. Justin stared for a moment. His hands stayed at his sides, not moving. Hailey noticed right away. She looked at his face, then followed his gaze across the room. When she saw Selena, her body froze for a second. Not because she was afraid or angry, just caught off guard. Selena nodded politely at the people she passed, greeting a few familiar faces with quiet words. She didn't walk toward Justin and Hailey. Instead, she joined a small group near the corner of the living room, standing with a glass of water and listening to someone talk. Her presence wasn't loud, but it couldn't be ignored. Hailey sat back down slowly. Justin joined her, but his eyes kept drifting toward that corner. He tried to look away, tried to stay in the moment, but it was clear his mind was no longer here, not fully. People at the party tried to carry on as usual. The music didn't stop. The food kept coming out. Jokes were still being told. But every now and then, someone would glance toward Selena. They were all thinking the same thing, but no one said it. Her arrival had stirred something. Old memories, old connections, and now, old questions. Hailey stayed quiet. She picked up her drink, took a small sip, and looked around the room. She watched how people moved, how they spoke in softer tones, how they tried not to look too long in Selena's direction. Everything felt slightly off. The warmth of the evening was still there, but it had cooled just a little. Justin finally spoke after a few minutes, saying something about needing air. Hailey nodded, but her mind was racing. She didn't know why Selena had come. Maybe she had been invited by someone else. Maybe she didn't even know Justin and Hailey would be there, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was that she was here, and everything that felt simple an hour ago no longer felt the same. The night had changed, and no one could pretend it had. Justin stood near the sliding glass doors that led out to the patio. The cool air from outside brushed against his face, but he barely noticed it. He kept glancing back into the living room, where Selena stood quietly among a few people. She wasn't talking much, just listening and nodding politely. Hailey watched him from her seat nearby. She could tell his thoughts were far away. And then it happened. Selena turned slightly, looked up, and her eyes met Justin's. They didn't smile. They didn't wave. They just looked at each other for only a few seconds. But in that moment, everything else around them seemed to fade. The music kept playing. People kept talking. But for Justin and Selena, it was as if the room had gone completely still. Hailey saw it. She didn't have to say anything. She felt the pause in the air and the silence between them. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was clear. Something passed between them. Maybe a memory, maybe nothing at all. But it left a weight behind. Hailey shifted in her seat, pretending to scroll through her phone, though her fingers weren't really moving. Her mind was focused on what she had just seen. Justin blinked, broke the gaze, and stepped outside for a moment. He didn't say where he was going, and Hailey didn't ask. She stayed seated, watching the door swing slowly shut behind him. Her thoughts were a blur. She didn't feel angry, but something deep inside her felt unsettled. Out on the patio, Justin leaned against the wooden railing, looking out into the dark garden. Lights hung above him, swaying slightly in the breeze. He took a deep breath. It wasn't that he had expected this night to be perfect. It was just that he hadn't expected it to turn like this. The past wasn't something he thought about often, and even when he did, it was just a part of his story. But seeing Selena there in the same room made that part of his story feel very real again. Inside, Hailey stood up and walked toward the kitchen, pretending to get more water. She passed by Selena's group without stopping, but she noticed how quiet they had become. She wondered if anyone else had seen the moment between Selena and Justin. Maybe they had. Maybe they hadn't. Either way, she felt like the only one standing in the middle of something no one else understood. After a few minutes, Justin came back inside. He walked past Hailey without saying much and returned to their seats. She joined him a moment later. Neither of them said anything right away. But the silence said more than words could. The room felt normal again. The music played, people laughed, plates clinked. But for Justin, Hailey, and Selena, the night had taken a turn they couldn't undo. Something had shifted, and now they all felt it. As the night continued, the mood in the room felt different. People were still talking, laughing, and moving around, but there was an undercurrent of tension that wasn't there before. Justin, though he tried to stay involved in the conversations around him, seemed distant. His focus was broken, his thoughts far away. He would glance toward the door, then quickly look away, as if he didn't want anyone to notice. Hailey, on the other hand, tried to keep herself busy. She joined a group of friends near the snack table, pretending to enjoy the conversation. But her mind kept drifting back to Justin and the way he had looked when he saw Selena. It wasn't a bad look, but it was something Hailey wasn't sure how to understand. She didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but it was hard to ignore. As the evening wore on, Justin grew quieter. He didn't speak as much, and when he did, his answers were short. Hailey noticed how he kept his distance, not physically, but emotionally. It wasn't like him to be so withdrawn. Usually, he was lighthearted, cracking jokes or talking about the things he was passionate about. But tonight, he just seemed different. The moment that had passed between Justin and Selena kept replaying in Hailey's mind. She couldn't stop thinking about how they looked at each other. Those few seconds that felt like much more. It was as though she had caught a glimpse of something she wasn't supposed to see. It wasn't about jealousy. It was more about feeling like a part of the story she was living had been interrupted by something from the past. Trying to push away those thoughts, Hailey decided to focus on the party. She forced herself to smile, to join in the conversation. But even as she did, She couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something had shifted in the air, and it wasn't just because Selena had walked into the room. Justin noticed Hailey trying to keep up the appearance of normalcy. He knew her well enough to see that she was pretending to be okay, but he didn't know how to fix it. He wanted to explain to her, to tell her that it wasn't what it seemed, but the words didn't come easily. He didn't want to make it a bigger deal than it needed to be, but he also didn't want Hailey to feel like she was imagining things. At some point, Justin got up from his seat and walked toward the back patio again. This time, Hailey didn't follow. She stayed where she was, watching him leave the room without saying a word. The silence in the room seemed to grow heavier, more uncomfortable. For a moment, everything felt off. The music in the background, the people still chatting, it all felt distant. It was as if Justin and Hailey had been pulled into another world, one where everything around them had lost its meaning. And as Justin stepped outside, looking up at the stars for a moment, he couldn't help but wonder, was this night just a small moment, or had it changed something much bigger? The night felt heavy, as if the quiet had settled over the room like a thick blanket. Justin had stepped outside again, leaving Hailey alone in the living room. She sat at a small table by the window, watching the lights flicker in the garden. It was a beautiful view, but it didn't bring her comfort. Something about the night felt off, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit properly. And no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, her mind kept going back to that moment, Justin and Selena, their eyes meeting, the world seeming to stop for a brief second. Hailey couldn't tell what exactly it was that bothered her. It wasn't jealousy, at least not in the way most people might think. It wasn't about Selena herself. It was about how everything seemed to shift so easily, how one small glance between Justin and Selena had completely changed the atmosphere. The room that had felt warm and inviting just hours ago now felt cold and distant. Hailey watched the group of people near the corner of the room, chatting and laughing, trying to pretend that nothing had changed. But she noticed the glances, the way some people kept looking over at Justin and Selena, their heads turning as if trying not to be obvious. It was clear they had noticed the tension too. And even if no one said anything, it was hard to ignore how everyone was aware of the shift. Selena, for her part, didn't seem to mind the attention. She remained calm, her posture relaxed. She laughed with the people around her, nodding politely as if she hadn't just walked into a room filled with memories that no one was ready to face. It was almost like she didn't realize the stir she was causing. But Hailey could see the way the group around her subtly changed their tone whenever they spoke. Their laughter was quieter, their conversations slower, as if they were waiting for something else to happen. Hailey felt a sense of isolation, though she was surrounded by friends. It wasn't that anyone was being rude, but the change in the room was too obvious to ignore. Even the atmosphere seemed to shift. Lighter conversations now had a weight to them, as if the unspoken tension had seeped into the very air they breathed. No one dared to mention Selena's name aloud, but it hung there in the background like a shadow. Justin, still outside, was unaware of how everyone else was reacting, or maybe he didn't want to be aware. He had his hands in his pockets, staring up at the stars, lost in his own thoughts. For a moment, he was alone in his mind, trying to figure out why this felt so complicated. He didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to confront the past, but it was harder than he had imagined. Everything felt tangled, like something he couldn't untangle no matter how hard he tried. Back inside, Hailey sighed and stood up. She walked slowly to the kitchen, trying to clear her mind, but it was no use. The whispers and glances around the room didn't stop. They were subtle, but they were there, reminding her that no matter how much time passed, some things from the past could never be left behind. Hailey had seen enough. The weight of the night was pressing down on her, making everything feel suffocating. It wasn't just Selena's unexpected arrival, it was everything that came with it. The way Justin had looked at her, the way the room had shifted, the glances people exchanged when they thought no one was looking. She couldn't stay in the middle of it anymore. It was like the walls were closing in on her. She excused herself quietly, not wanting to draw attention to her departure. She made her way through the crowd, her footsteps slow but steady. The sounds of chatter and laughter faded as she moved farther into the house. The kitchen, the hallway, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what had happened. Finally, she reached the bathroom. It was a small, simple room with soft lighting and a quiet stillness. Hailey closed the door behind her, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her head. The noise outside seemed so far away now, but it didn't bring the relief she had hoped for. The reflection in the mirror didn't offer much comfort. Hailey's eyes looked tired, her expression distant. She hadn't expected the night to turn out like this. She hadn't expected to feel this way. She had come here to enjoy herself, to have a simple evening with Justin and a few friends, but now everything felt so complicated. Her mind kept going back to that moment when Justin had looked at Selena. It wasn't just a glance, it was something more, a quiet understanding between them that Hailey couldn't quite grasp. She didn't know if it was something old or something new, but it was there, and it had changed the course of the evening. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something between her and Justin had shifted. She stared at her reflection, trying to steady her thoughts. Why does this matter so much? She asked herself. Why does it feel like the whole night is falling apart? It wasn't that she didn't trust Justin. It wasn't that she was worried about him and Selena. It was more about the feeling of being in a place where things weren't as clear as they once were. The past had a way of creeping into the present, reminding them of things they had long ago set aside. After a few moments, Hailey splashed some cold water on her face. The coolness helped clear her head, but the unease still lingered. She stood in front of the mirror for another minute, taking slow, deep breaths, trying to calm the storm inside her. She knew she couldn't stay in the bathroom forever. She couldn't hide away from everything that had happened, but she wasn't ready to face it either. For now, all she wanted was a little more time to collect herself before stepping back into the chaos of the night. Hailey wiped her face and took another breath. Then she opened the bathroom door and stepped back into the quiet hum of the party. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but for now, she knew she needed to return. When Hailey stepped back into the living room, the atmosphere hadn't changed much. People were still scattered around in small groups, chatting and laughing. The music played softly in the background, though it seemed quieter now, almost like it was trying to blend into the tension that lingered in the air. Hailey glanced around, searching for Justin. He was nowhere to be seen. Her heart skipped a beat. Had he left? She felt a sudden wave of concern. He hadn't seemed like himself for the past hour, and now he had disappeared. She didn't want to make a scene, but the unease in her chest made it difficult to stand still. She moved toward the front of the house, her footsteps light as she passed by guests who were too caught up in their own conversations to notice her. Justin was standing by the door leading to the outside patio. He didn't see her at first. His back was to her, and he was staring out into the yard, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. Hailey hesitated for a moment. The night was quiet now, with only the soft hum of distant conversations and the faint music playing from inside the house. Justin and Hailey stood outside, near the patio door, the cool night air a slight contrast to the warmth of the party inside. It felt like the world had slowed down just for them. It was as if time had stopped, leaving them standing in the middle of everything, unsure of what to do next. Hailey, I don't know what to say, Justin said, his voice filled with a mix of uncertainty and regret.